Well, howdy folks, welcome back. Hey, this episode is going to be about how to trim a brisket. I've had several requests from my viewers to please produce more videos on how to trim certain cuts of meat and how to prepare certain things. So the same way I did with the skirt steak and with ribs, I'm going to show you the right way to prep out a brisket. What to remove, what to keep, and also I'm going to show you how to slice it up once you get it cooked up. You've got two different muscles, the grain runs two different directions. I'm going to show you how to separate it all out and make it work. Now, let's get at it. Okay guys, it's time for us to trim up our brisket, and there's basically going to be three serious deposits of fat that you deal with on your brisket. Now of course there's not much on top here, but on certain types of beef, like let's say Black Angus, you're going to see on this side of the meat a big clump of fat right here. And it's kind of an extension of what you're seeing right here, this little bitty one that runs right here. All right, and what that is that's simply the fat that runs in between this cut of meat and this cut of meat. Believe it or not, there's two muscles here, guys. And so these two muscles control different movements. This one up here, the flat, actually controls the cow's leg moving forward and backward, and this one down here actually controls the cow's leg in and out from side to side. So it's a little bit smaller because they do less work with that muscle. Anyway, the grains run separate on those two, and it gets into slicing later. But what I want to tell you about this is we got to remove, if you've got that big band of fat here, trim it down so it's only 1/4 of an inch. We'll take off a little bit of that, but not much. The next one is right here. In between this muscle and this one, you have this huge slice of fat that runs right up under there, and it comes out right on this other side where you saw this, okay? The grain on this runs perpendicular to the grain on this. So the grain here is running this way, and the grain on this muscle is actually running this way. All right, so later when we go to slicing this, once I've cut so far into the flat, right about to here, I then stop and I separate those two pieces of meat and slice them separate one from the other so that I can cut across the grain on this one. Otherwise you'll have long pieces of meat grain on some of your slices if you don't do that. Now let's get busy taking out that fat, and then the fat that's on the back here. On this side over here, you're going to run into a real hard, knobby feeling fat, and that can be trimmed down a little bit. You don't need your fat to be too thick. Guys, there's only so much fat that can render down through this meat, okay? Now, I caught a little of my meat here, and it's not going to matter. I'm just taking that little nubbin off. Right here, I'm going to thin this just slightly. There we go. Not much. I want to keep the majority of my fat. Now back here, where I have this big one, and this is very dense fat. If you like rendering your own fat down, you know, to use it later on, you know, like having tallow around the house, the way some people keep bacon fat or whatever, you just have to cook this stuff gently and slowly, and then the liquid that you get from it, you let that recongeal, and that is your tallow right there. You see, this is extremely thick, and that's not going to do us any good to have that much fat in any location. All right, so basically what that fat's doing, it is so thick that it prevents our smoke from getting full penetration, okay? And you've seen how much I've taken off of that. So you're getting some idea of how really, oops, went into my meat. There we go, not a problem. There we are. So thin that up. This over here doesn't really need much of anything unless you notice it's intensely thick. You can take out some of it, but I try not to get too wild through this center fat. Now we'll move on to that next section of fat. I mentioned to you before that sometimes certain breeds will have a big slab right here, and that's this part. It's the continuation of what goes in between the two. But if you do have too much there, just go ahead and remove that. And then the last spot is that huge honking piece right here. Now, so what I want to do here is I'm going to make a cut with my knife right up in there. Now, let's open this up and look. Look how deep it is before we get to meat. I'm sorry, folks, but this is nothing but a huge wedge of fat right here, and it's not going to do anything good for you, all right? Some of the fat can render through meat, but when you get too much fat, there's no way it can all render through there. Look at that. As I said, one massive wedge of fat. Now I've opened this up. There's less fat up in here. I'm going to trim it just slightly more. But now that fat is thin enough in this spot that I can get smoke directly into my meat right there. And there's still enough fat to render through everything else. Fat is good, but there can also be too much fat. Forgive the way I'm cutting on some of this. Sometimes using good knife skills and getting the right camera angle are in conflict with each other. All right, that is flat, beautiful right there. Good, 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 good. We have now the right amount of fat on our meat. We have a little that sticks out over here. This can be pulled back some. That was from that thick layer on the back side, where we took out almost as much as that. Now I'm ready for my dry rub to get that done. And it's time to get this thing sliced. So what I want to do is I'm going to remove it from this pan, put it down on the cutting board, and I'm going to show you how to slice out a brisket the right way, okay? Because you remember, you got two different muscles here, and they've got to be sliced different one from the other. So let me show you how to do that. There we go. We've transferred our meat. Now, let me tell you something. The grain on this meat runs this way, the direction that this is angled. So if I cut from this point this way, I get cuts directly across the grain. They will come out very tender and beautiful. That is the right way to do it. All right, guys, and as I mentioned, we got two cuts here, but if I go ahead and start making my first cuts up to about here, then we will see that other piece of meat, the second muscle. And at that point, that's when we're going to separate those two pieces. It's easier to do it this way. Now, before we get started on all of this, we want to remove what we call the burnt ends, okay? So that's this little goodie right back here. I'm going to put him over here. I'm going to remove that tip. By the way, the parts that I'm taking off right now are what some barbecue places will charge a great deal of extra money for. The flavor, oh, yeah. So those burnt tips, and you got another one right over here, these are all worth extra money in a barbecue place, all right? You're going to pay more for that right there. Now, you're sliced flat. See how that's starting to kind of just shred on me. Now, we're getting into that deeper fat cap here pretty soon. I'm going to be cutting into that second muscle. What I want to do is to transfer my meat back into that beautiful au jus that I had in my other pan. Now, let's get this transferred over from here to my other location, my pan. Looky here, guys, you're starting to see a little different appearance in that lower band of fat. And we're seeing that second cut of meat right there. Okay, this is the point where I separate my two cuts, and you can see them. They move one on top of the other here. You see that? Now, let me go ahead and move these pieces. And those will be my last of those first cuts off of the flat. Now I'm going to make more cuts off of the flat, but they won't have all of the rest of that underneath it. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to separate that by taking my knife right up through there, guys, just like that. Isn't that beautiful? Watch how that comes off. There we go. This piece, which is that lower muscle, guys, let me tell you something. We're looking at a different grain set here. So what I need to do is turn this over. As you can see, we're running with the grain here. So what I need to do is to cut this way, all right? Now, some of my cuts are going to be long. So what I want to do, I want to split this in half, and I can make my cuts this way. Before I do that, though, I'm going to finish up my flat and get that up in my pan. And this, by the way, proper way to divide that brisket down and get it sliced up. So you know the right way of doing it now. Okay, guys, now our other pieces. Remember, we were going to be cutting cross grain on those also. So here we go. Now this head meat, much more delicate, much more tender, because it had so much more fat in it, and it makes the best chopped barbecue. So if you like that chopped barbecue, that is the stuff to get right there. And then our burnt tips, I always put off to one corner. There it is, guys. Isn't that beautiful? That is barbecue brisket at its finest. Well, guys, there it is. How to trim a brisket is not so very hard when you know what's really going on. Yeah, you got two muscles there, and yeah, they run in two different directions. So knowing what to trim, where to trim, how to handle the thing isn't so tough when it's been explained, but you know, looking at that thing, it can be kind of intimidating at first. Don't be afraid to cook one of these up. You've also seen how to give it a good cut after it's been cooked, and folks, that one works every time. I would like to say thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking Today, and to my subscribers, guys, thank you so very much. I do appreciate that. If you would, please subscribe if you haven't. Click the like button, drop some comments down below. I really appreciate that. We also take suggestions here, and please share my videos. Folks, if you would, you have a good day. Bye-bye.